In this section, we're going to consider the expectancy of success. In other words, does success feel possible for your learners? Students are not going to learn something that they think is impossibly difficult if they or you think that only certain people can do this or that this conflicts with everything I believe. There isn't any point to try, right? There's likely a context for student resistance. Additionally, we can become aware of what and why our resistance is to that resistance as teachers. What do students talk about when they are thinking about their own expectations for success? You might hear things like, how confident am I in my ability to succeed? Or, I've never been good at this. I don't do well on standardized tests. Or, I'm not a math person. What are the rewards for doing this? And who am I competing with? Here's where we can talk about the idea of personal agency. For example, it is reasonable for students to think, if I work hard, I will learn. And secondly, I am capable of doing the work. So let's consider, as we are doing our planning, how do we help learners feel like they can actually succeed? Here we're talking about scaffolding and sequencing. As you see, we're talking about incremental and cumulative learning. We're allowing students to work their way up to hard or difficult. Some concrete examples here. How do you plan for a range of challenges and include review and challenge materials? This is easy to include, for example, in an online Moodle site and let students either find those review materials that they need or bump themselves up to some challenge materials that are optional and maybe can take them to the next level of learning. Secondly, do you clearly articulate your expectations on a syllabus and beyond? Extension of your syllabus, how do you continue verbalizing your clear expectations throughout your whole entire Moodle site? Also, do you plan to engage students in documenting expectations? You can do this in an online forum or in person, and you can periodically revisit these throughout the duration of your course. Now, let's next consider how we can set students up for success in their learning activities. First of all, we acknowledge that learning to learn is a skill. As a part of reflection on learning, focus students on the big three of new attitudes, skills, and abilities you want them to be conscious of needing to develop, and that you're going to focus on coaching. Some concrete examples. You can use a wrapper to wrap reflections into learning. Wrappers are short activities that direct students to review their performance and the instructor's feedback on an exam, for example, with an eye toward adapting their future learning. Exam wrappers are going to ask students 3 kinds of questions. How did they prepare for the exam? What kinds of errors did they make on the exam? And finally, what could they do differently next time? Another thing you can do is offer expert advice, such as reading strategies that might work for different types of reading material. You can tell students what your strategies are for reading different academic works and teach them those skills to use in their own reading and learning. When you think about learning assessments, what we're talking about here with expectancy of success is how we can broaden our idea of testing. What we think about here, what do students actually do to learn? In-person or online discussions can be effective here. Do you do collaborative problem solving in person or perhaps some Google Docs activity online? As well, you can employ frequent in-person or online quizzing so that you're not just having students read or watch lectures or visit websites, but you're actually having them do something with the material that they're supposedly learning. Secondly, you can employ quick self-assessment activities. You can do a 3-2-1 activity where you're asking them 3 things they learned, 3 things they are still confused about, and maybe 1 question to take their learning to the next level. Or maybe you could assign a 1-minute paper so that they have 1 minute to really jot down all the things that they learned or have questions about in that day or that week of content. You could also consider who, when, and how who is providing the feedback to students. And note that it always doesn't have to be you. You can use the self or the peer assessment techniques as well. So here we're going to pause again, and it's your turn to think about the following questions. Think about how might you use stories, and whose stories about learning to spark students' sense of what they can do. How do you make it safe to take risks when students are learning new things in new ways? And how can you make room within your grading scheme for learners' progress in meeting the outcomes in a sequenced and scaffolded way? we'll stop and pause the recording here.